Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Gisela, and I am the founder of Latinos Homeschooling. And this is a podcast about, you know, about having conversations about education and helping Latino homeschooling parents thrive by sharing stories from different families and also a lot different education experts. And today I have the honor of having Nellie Escalante, who is a museum educator, an artist, and she's taught at several places in New York, which is cool. One of them that I've been following on social media is the Museo del Barrio, and I hope to add it to one of my checklists of museums I want to visit. So welcome, Nellie. She's here
Yes.
today to um, talk about art. She's very passionate, especially how we can include it in our homeschooling curriculum. Because if you're like me, art and science are one of the subjects that I really, I guess I don't want to say shy away from, but I get a little intimidated by, because I never really explored it or really had a lot of education in it. But Nellie, you're an historian educator. If you can talk to us a little bit about what you do and how you have helped families and individuals with art, that would be awesome.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. When I heard about Latino homeschooling, I just thought like, what is such an amazing organization, an amazing opportunity for kids to learn about their own history as they're growing up. I think we spoke about this before, like a lot of the, Latino, Latinx art that I've learned is really came from my college education. I didn't really learn about it growing up. So I just want to, kudos to you for starting this organization. So yeah, I live in the Bronx in New York, and I work in several museums. And yeah, I've my career really started in culturally specific museums. Like I got a very traditional art history education, the Western canon, and nothing about, Black artists, Latino artists. And I was very intentional when I graduated. I wanted to start working in a Latin American museum. And back then, El Museo del Barrio was the only one. So I started my career there and learned so much. My first job was to look through the artist archive and to, just get that together and organize it. And it was just such a treasure of Latin American, Latino artists that I just fell in love with our artists. And so I've been just giving tours and doing programs for, yeah, really for school children, older adults, everyone. And now since the pandemic, I've been doing a lot of programs online through Zoom, which I love because, there's only so much art you can see in a museum, right? But there, Zoom kind of just opens everything up. You can show so many different combinations and so many different kinds of art. So I think it's what you mentioned that when you're not, you don't have the expertise in particular subjects. You said art and science, and I think that can feel daunting. But as I told you before, I really want to give you some tools today to help you include Latino art into your homeschooling. And it's not rocket science. And one of the first things I want to tell you is and share with you is that museums are amazing resources, and not just like museums like in person, of course. Like if you can see real art, that's amazing. But I know that some of your families are from all over, and museums have amazing websites that sometimes we don't really realize what's in there and what we can access. El Museo del Barrio, for instance, on their website, they have a tab called Watch and Listen. And so on there, they have some amazing programs called for preschoolers. So in particular, if you have preschoolers, they have something called the Coqui Club. And they've pre-recorded a lot of these programs that they've had online during the pandemic. And I was watching some of them, and even though they're recorded, you can still kind of get into it. You can read the book with the person. They always showcase a Latino, Latin American artist. They read a book that has to do with that. So it's a really easy way to incorporate art into your day just by watching one of these videos and also having a conversation with your child while watching. There's also a tab called, I think it's Archives, and it
Mhm.
contains a lot of free catalogs from past exhibitions in PDF form. And so a lot of people don't know this, and a lot of these catalogs are kind of like out of print and people pay a lot of money for it, but it's free of charge on the website. And so you can really just you have a variety of different exhibitions that are from the past. Um, and you could read up on the artist. And so these are just like little ways that you can have access to some of our art for your curriculum. I know that MOLA, the Museum of Latin American Art, also has PDF art lessons as well.
Wow.
So those are just two museums, and there's so many Latino museums that have, usually in the educator tab, if you look at educational resources, and I usually have it on the top, they have like a slew of resources that families can access just as a starting point, right? As someone who's a novice who doesn't know much. And museums are great too because they've already done a lot of the work for you. They've already curated an exhibition
Mm.
around a theme with several artists. So you can really just use an exhibition as a starting start to just begin a conversation with your children about art. And there's also videos. That's another thing. I love the curatorial walkthroughs that
Mhm.
are at El Museo del Barrio. In there, it's pre-recorded, so you have a curator who's actually teaching you and showing you some of the artworks, and what they're about. And so it's almost like having a little tour from your home. So I think that would be a really great starting point, like if you wanted to just have, like, where do I start? Like, museums are really great. So I said a mouthful there.
No, no, you're fine. I want to backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to hear your story a bit. So you're, a lot of I think sometimes a lot of us don't see us having a job or a career in working in a museum, which I think we need a lot more representation there too. But
Yeah.
can you how did you start to develop this love for art and museums? Did it come from, when did you start college with the desire to do what you're doing now? Or you said you were very intentional in what you were doing.
Yeah. So that's a good question because people ask me that too. And I was like, there was never a plan B. Like, my mom was a seamstress. She would sew. So she would sew us these beautiful dresses. She was also a paraprofessional. Like, after she gave her work up at the factory, she got a degree and she became a para at her school. And so she did these amazing bulletin boards. And so art was always around us. And I think we, as Latinos, we don't realize how like much a part art is in our lives. Like, our abuelitas knitted, they crocheted, they sewed. I think it's only here in the US where like art is like a profession that you do with a capital A, right? It's like, but it's always been part of my life, like just drawing and making clothes, and we would make these paper flowers. And so I think when I was starting high school, the only high school I wanted to go to was LaGuardia, High School of Music and Art, like the famous Fame School. And my mom was like, like, we lived in the Bronx. She didn't want me to take the subway, and she was like, "No, you're gonna go to the school right here." And I was like, "Mommy, just let me try out and see if I don't make it, I'll go to the neighborhood school." And I made it. And I it was also with the help of, like, I had an amazing middle school art teacher who
Mhm.
just took me under his wing, um, helped me with my portfolio, and so that really helped me to make it into the school. And that was the beginning. Like, I saw that, um, I had this talent for painting and drawing, but I still didn't know if I could make it as an artist. And at the end of like this, our senior year in LaGuardia in high school, you had to take an art history course. And that's when I was like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. Like, can I, can I be in a museum and be around surrounded by art and talk about art all day? Like, is this possible? And I graduated and I just told my mom I was gonna major in art history, which was like, oh my God. She was like, what? She was like, it's not even ni siquiera historia de arte. Like it's not even history. It's art history. You're making it so small. You're never gonna get a job. Why don't you become a teacher? And that when I talk to my other colleagues that are Latinos, that's always the fear, right? That we're not gonna make money and it's going to be hard for us. Um, but I always think I believe in that mantra. You do what you love and the money does follow. A lot of doors began to open and I got a scholarship. And with the scholarship, a mentor was attached to it. And her husband was an artist. And so they took me to museums and they helped me do my cover letter and they put a resume together for me. And um, the first place that I sent a letter to be an intern was El Museo, and they said yes right away. So I think for me there was just no plan B. Like if this failed, I didn't know what I was gonna do.
And
um,
it's a great, it's a great job. And I think recently the Museum of Latino in Washington, D.C. started a program to get people, Latinos, interested in working in a museum and
that's
about all of
great.
the roles you can have
Yeah.
in a museum. And actually, they were sued by some senators saying that's discrimination against other population, but that's another
Oh
subject.
no. Yeah.
But I'm
Ah,
glad that 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 those opportunities are popping up. I one of the moms that lives nearby, I mean, Chicago is also filled with museums, and we have
yeah.
a campus, we have a Puerto Rican museum, we have a Mexican museum,
Hmm.
we have the Art Institute. I mean, that's just naming a few.
Yeah.
When you're a homeschooler here, especially in Chicago, my husband reminds me all the time, and the kids, that we're lucky to be homeschooling here where we
Hmm.
live, because he's like, you guys have a classroom. It's, he grew up in Ohio, and wouldn't have been the case where if I would.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
lot of us moms know all about the museums. That's our classroom. We love it when they're empty during the day. We
Yeah.
avoid museums in the summertime, and we avoid them when it's holidays, like the that when
Yeah. Oh,
off.
definitely.
Because
Definitely.
like, and even my kids, when they were younger, I would forget, and we would go to the science museum, and they're like, "What are people doing here?
Right.
This is our space."
Right, right.
Um,
Do you find that in Chicago, like they cater to homeschoolers, like their particular programs or
Not as much. They are starting to see it, because right now I'm organizing a conference and I've been reaching out to some,
okay,
and the Science Museum is supporting my conference. And I found
awesome.
out when I was in a meeting with them that a lot of the people that work there are homeschooled. Were homeschooled.
Oh
The
wow.
the people that are run education programs, curate as well,
Hmm.
and they told me they joke about that, you know, between among coworkers.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think they're starting to, and I want them to know, because that's a great opportunity, because we're there,
Yeah.
we're always there. But one thing that I wanted to mention, my son was in baseball a couple years ago. He ended up not liking it, but I met a mom there that works for one of the museums here, and she's Latina as well. And I found out she's like the head of memberships.
Okay.
The head person. And
Yeah.
her husband was telling me when her family found out that she got this job at the museum, they assume that she had the lowest and job that you could possibly have,
Yeah.
like either just standing there in the lobby, which there's nothing wrong with those jobs.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
he even said, not even our own people assume that we have these roles, and that's why it's important for you
Yeah.
for people like my children or me to see you and everybody having these important roles in our museums. You know,
Thank you. I
yeah,
also think, you're right. There are not many people, of color in general, like on the floor doing tours and giving
yeah,
tours, and there's still a lot of work to be done. But they also need our perspective, because we have art from Latin Americans, indigenous art. It exists, and
yeah,
if we don't participate in the interpretation of it, it'll be interpreted by other voices.
yeah,
And what I mean is like, mostly white voices. And so it's important that we have more of us, out, talking about and having conversations about our own art,
yeah,
because it's lived experiences, like the other day I gave a tour at El Museo, and the main art that I was talking about was an artwork by Pepon Osorio, who's a Puerto Rican like installation artist, and he did this amazing bed with all of these capias. Do you know what capias are?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
I don't think they're used that much anymore, right? I
no,
haven't
I
seen
don't
that
I
much.
don't think so. But back then, yeah, like when I was growing up, I had a drawer full of them.
Yeah, my
And
mom would put them in her curtain. She'd have a long roll of all the quinceañeras, baptisms.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
What
everybody.
did you have? I'm sorry, with capias, you had a long trainer. How did you put them in your room, the capias?
Oh no, well, this particular artist had this artwork that he put him on the bed. I had a drawer full. No, I just like every time we opened the drawer, it's like capias like fell out, because everywhere we went, there was like, little capias they would give us. But, to my audience didn't know anything about what that was, And so I was able not only to tell them what it was, but it was my lived experience, like this is how we use them. And so being, a Puerto Rican museum educator, a Latino museum educator in general, you have that lived experience. You're able to share, and it's really important when we're interpreting, when artwork is out on the floor, and you can add that to the interpretation. So it's so important. Yeah.
I'm just curious. How
Yeah.
would how would you explain capias?
Oh, that's a good question. So a capia, I guess, is a party favor, a Latino party favor, right? You mostly, they're like this ribbon. It's a lace bedding. It's like a lace base with ribbons, with inscribed in it is the actual event, like whatever, Maria's baby shower, and then you have the date on the other side of the ribbon. And so then they're pinned on, and yeah, baby showers, birthdays, baptisms, they're usually given out during those occasions. And I think it's just so awesome too that our artists are using some of these things that, again, like I mentioned before, right? That's artistry, you had to put it together. You had, like, my mom used to make them, and she used to go to the shop and get the little souvenirs. They're usually like these plastic babies, or whatever, plastic wine glasses if it's a wedding. And she used to sew them together. And so that's an artistry within itself. And we had this lived experience full of that, full of these, craft making, blankets, and I can only talk about from my own Puerto Rican experience, which is, I think, another reason why it's important to learn just our history or our way of life through art, because there's so many different traditions, even within our own Latino community, so many artistic traditions. And so it's just a great way to get to know, artistry from Mexico or from Paraguay, or even Uruguay, Colombia. Like, I have a lot of Colombian friends, and you know they have their own, indigenous art making traditions, and it's just been really wonderful to just to learn about all of these. And how great to learn about it at a young age, you know, where you're just like growing up with it and as if it were normal, right? To learn. And I think that was the reaction of my mom. It's like, oh my God, you're gonna do, you know, you're gonna do art history. No one's gonna give you a job. It's because, you know, we didn't have that like art history, like or art appreciation education growing up. Which I really missed, and I think that's so what I commend you in doing and incorporating it in such a young age. So
Yeah, I can do a lot better at home. Honestly, I have outsourced art and my kids aren't learning from a Latino artist. I don't want to say, unfortunately,
that's
she's
okay.
been a great teacher to them for the last
Yeah,
6 years, and they like the environment. But
that's what's most important.
yeah, but I want them to know, my mom isn't here anymore, and like the things that you're telling me resonate with me because my mom
Mm,
was a teacher in Mexico before moving to this country. So art was very, very in Mexico in part of life in the curriculum. Like we have the papel picado since I was little during Christmas. They would put it on
yeah.
the streets, and there were a lot of families were at home making the papel picado. You would drop them off to the, I guess they're in the town, to whoever was gonna put them up. And not only that, there's a lot of festivities in our town during the summertime. There the big feast is the festival of Santo Santiago. So I need to see learn more about the history, but there's people dress up as Moors and
Yes,
they
yeah.
dance, and even the capes and everything have to be made and designed by each
Mm,
family that who's you're going to represent.
yeah.
Well, I remember even sitting before those days with friends that were who they were going to be in part of that festivity, were going to perform,
Hmm.
and I saw how they were putting the beads together and the capes and making just putting the mask and everything.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's not it's basically very, very part or even essential to who we are in artists. And I think something that probably the education system does here in the US is kind of make it separate than who we are,
Yeah.
because we live in a diverse country with a lot of cultures, and one dominant culture is educating our children. But like you said, even growing up in the 80s here, you went to those parties, everybody gave you a capia.
Yeah.
You never question what is this, we just put it in a drawer. And that's awesome that an artist kind of pointed out, look at all of this that I have, all
Right,
the parties.
right.
And now I don't see them anymore. And
Yeah.
my
I
daughter,
did
yeah,
I did order for this particular tour, I did order some because
wow,
I didn't, you know, I didn't know where to get them. So you're right, like no one does it. So I just looked online and people do make them, I guess, for people who request them. So I was able to do it. But yeah, it was only through ordering online that I was able to do that. I don't see it's not as readily kind of like common.
yeah.
Um,
And it was when we were growing up,
right,
and,
right.
and it's just I think that's something we need to get back to. There's
Yeah.
little few traditions, but you
Yeah,
know
even with me, you know, like I have two boys. And so, you know, I sew at home and things like that, but you know, they're not really into it. But I think it's whatever my older son just loves. He doesn't love making art, like he loves analyzing, which I love because that's what I do too, right? So I think it's whatever, you know, there's a match like things that you like to do and maybe you know if your kid is around and sees you doing it like they might you know have an interest in it but I mean there's no judgment I think it's yeah you know that's kind of has been like a lost thing like we don't really yeah incorporate those things and it has to be intentional you know
yeah,
like I
no, for
the
us.
sewing like I saw my mom sewing and I was like okay I want to learn how to sew and I'm grateful that I've continued it. Like my sisters have stopped doing it, for whatever reason, and that's okay. They have other things, like my older sister loves photography. My younger sister loves photography. My older sister, like, is into the music. But I think it's something that, maybe just finding ways of incorporating it, in small ways. I think with art appreciation, that's a really accessible way. I have a couple of books here I wanted to just point out, and there's so many, like, um, this is a really great book, Hispanic Art in the United States. And these are both older, and I'm pointing them out because they're really cheap to get on the internet.
Okay.
But art is art, and so they have really great images. And you can just, I would just, like, this is a really cool one. I mean, I just opened it, and there's just so much to say, like, about this one image. What are they doing? What are they, is that water? Is that crystals? Like, already you have a whole wondering. And that's where you start. You start like with an image that is interesting to you. You do a little bit more digging about the artist, like what, his background, his process. I always like to have little artist quotes in my back pocket, because even though my kids might ask me, what, what does this mean or what does that mean? But if you have the artist's own words also, you can say, like, well, I don't know, but I do know that this is what the artist said about his own work. And so you can't argue with that. You can't argue with the artist's own words. So I love having artist quotes during my tours, because it's like, you can interpret it any way you want, but this is what the artist, was thinking about when he was making this art piece.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't have to be so, one of the things I start out my tours with is, what do you see? What do you see? There's no right or wrong. Everyone sees whatever they see. And then you're like, oh, what makes you say that? And then you fill in the gaps with some of the research that you might do about a work of art. Yeah, definitely. Like, if you want to pick it out beforehand, or have your kids with you and say, let's look at this art, at this art book. Which artwork would you like to talk about next week? It gives them, some empowerment and ownership over the artwork. Like, we picked this artwork to discuss.
Mhm.
If it's a Hispanic art book, then it's a Hispanic artist. So it's a great starting point. And I really just want to, like, kind of demystify, like art appreciation. Like, it doesn't have to be, sure, I have a degree and I have a certain amount of knowledge. I know how to give tours. I know how to facilitate art talks, and I love that. But I think that it doesn't have to be so complicated. We can ask questions. Um, there's so much information now on YouTube that we can access that. And it can be something like a small part of your day, or even a small part of your week, if you want to do one artist a week. I think you can also lean on these like traditional days, like, Hispanic Heritage Month, the Black History Month. If you want a framework, like, okay, we're going to discuss, Afro Latino artists on, Black Heritage Month. Um, there's Puerto Rican Heritage Month. There's the Independence Days of all of our countries. So that gives us a little framework, right? It gives us a framework as to, like, how we can incorporate some of our art. But really, I like I said, I really want to empower parents that they can do this. And then if they need help, then yes, seek, like, there's nothing wrong in outsourcing and seeking help outside. Like, I do Zoom talks. That's part of what I do as my job, like, and my business. Like, I offer fun, engaging talks over Zoom. And so I'm happy to do that. But yeah, but I think that it's really easy. It's accessible. Like, there's so many tools out there that you can really like, we can latch on to. And I think also, like, it's another entryway into our Latinidad, right? Like, I'm not a person that is like into like cooking, and I don't know how to dance very well. Like the way I access my Puerto Ricanness is through speaking Spanish and art. And of course, like I love the music and I eat the food, but that's just not part of, like, I'm not very good at those aspects of it. And I would imagine that, growing up, some of our kids might be more open to discussing their culture through art. And so it's just another entry point into our Hispanicness, our Latinidad. So I always say that, like, there's so many entry points, and some people don't enter through, like the mainstream. It's like music, the food, and so art sometimes is relegated to the background, but it's such a huge way to really learn about our culture.
Yeah, and like in the National Museum of Mexican Art, every year they do a Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos exhibition. Excuse me. And every year they change it, and it's like it's nice to see different artists creating these altars. And
Yeah,
even though it's something that's every single year it's so different. And our homeschool group has been on a couple tours with that, just to have somebody explain that. And actually
sure.
recently we're blessed because we have the Puerto Rican Museum here too. And
Right.
there was I need to send you the link to this. There was last week there was an exhibition about an animation artist. She did a a novel, and it was about a superhero that's Puerto Rican.
Oh,
And
La Borinqueña.
is she from New York?
I think so. I
Really?
think she is.
And I couldn't go because my children have activities on Saturdays, but I really wanted
Yeah,
to go. But I shared the event on Facebook, and I said, take your kids, meet this artist.
right.
I'm always about education, and I think like you said, there might be another generation, because I see even I run I a few of us, we have a co-op, and I'm one of the classes that I teach is literature.
Oh,
And
wow.
the four students that are in my class, they love to draw, including my
Mhm.
daughter. She's in my class. And one of the students asked me, instead of just writing, can we do can we start illustrating what we draw? And I said, yeah, by all means, I would love for all of you to express yourself.
Yeah. Wow.
But then they can't count on me to teach them how to draw. I
Right.
gave them the task to help each other out, because they're already teenagers. I'm like, you guys can work together,
Yeah. Yeah.
and bounce off ideas with each other. One of the girls took her huge collection of markers to
Oh,
share with
wow.
everybody, with like different shades. And my daughter has those types of markers too. So that's something that my daughter has started to draw on her own. And
Yeah.
my mom, when she was living, she would help them. Um, she would put on her teacher hat. And I think
Yeah.
when I first started homeschooling, just like your mom, my mom was pretty much against it, because
Hmm.
like a lot of immigrant parents that come here, they count on this education system, and that's
Yeah.
from where they were. And but then after a few months she got excited, because she started going to Mexico and just buying different things so that she can come and give my kids an art lesson. And
Yeah.
like what you would say, manualidades, or
Hmm.
you take over. So it was great.
It's so
But
empowering. I mean,
yeah.
it's so, I mean, again, like I'm like looking on at what you're doing, and there was such a divide when I was growing up in the public school system with my culture. Like we did Puerto Ricanness at home, and
Mhm.
then at school, it's like what they call code switching. You were supposed to be the good American. We spoke Spanish there, we spoke English here at school. It was so, now that I think of it, it's like such a division. And you're like, what you're doing, it's just really like bridging that gap and making kids whole and being able to be, who they are in school, at wherever they are. There's an integration of the self. And it's one of the reasons why I just love sharing Latino art, because I didn't have that experience that young. And it's so important to show kids that they can be themselves in the public sphere, you know, they can show who they are. They speak Spanish. They can talk about, you know, just their culture like anywhere. And that's acceptable, and it should be okay. Some people don't like it, but it should be okay. And I love that you're instilling that so young, you know, it's such a confidence in their culture.
Thank
So
you. Can
yeah.
you tell me a little bit of how you, so you have the, some Zoom workshops and you help parents. Can you tell me a little bit about what you've done in the past with that?
Yeah, so I've been doing workshops mostly now with caregivers,
Okay.
through museums. And then I kind of branched out and started just offering it through just anybody who was interested. And at first, it really became mostly my church and other churches who and their families, just showcasing Latino and Latino art in general, Black artists. And I really tailor it to the family and or the organization. So for church, I always talk about the faith component within art, but it's really something that's tailored to 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 families. And honestly, I haven't done it as much. Like, I really want to do it more. And I actually partnered with an amazing homeschooler. Her name is Erica Alicea, and she's also Puerto Rican. And during the pandemic, we started this it's called the Art of Color Study, and there are these art kits that just showcase artists of color. And
Oh,
it was a way to really to help families and homeschool families, but also anybody who was interested in just a kind of a kit. Like we have, it's like 6 to 8 prints. She's an amazing writer, so she wrote this beautiful living biography. I did the descriptions of the artwork. And so it's kind of like an easy way to just be able to just incorporate art into your homeschool. And so that's another way that we've been helping families. We only have 2 kids so far. We're working on our third one, and we're hoping to have a lot more. So I do that with her, and then I do the Zoom talks on Zoom with families. And then I've also given tours in person to homeschoolers. So it's something that museums in New York City really want to service homeschoolers. I don't know if you know, but they always say, like, we don't know where to go. We don't have an in, like the education department. And so I just encourage you to like make yourself known, because they do, like the 2 museums that I work at, the Met and also the Jewish Museum, especially, they have said that like we really want to help homeschoolers, but we don't know where they are and we don't know how to access them.
wow.
So I've done tours for homeschooling families through Erica's my partner, her co-op. So yeah.
So, a lot of people in our group are probably from where you're at, and I think, even if you one day want to create an event on there and just give a shout out to some New York City people and do a tour specifically for um Latino homeschoolers in New York, that would
Sure.
and of course, we could talk about that later, but that
Yeah,
would,
yeah.
you can do that. Um, and
I
that way,
would
I
love
think,
that.
like you said, New York wants to cater to homeschoolers. So, I mean, you could probably be a little bridge between, that. And because, yeah,
Definitely.
we also want to work with museums. We want them.
Yeah.
Well, but and sometimes I think it's just hard because a lot of them focus on after school programs, or they'll go to it's really after school or like Saturday programs. For example, Chicago has 2 zoos. We have the one in Chicago, which is part of the Chicago Park District, which is
Hmm.
Lincoln Park, and it's free. And then we have the Brookfield Zoo, which is in the suburbs, and it's bigger. Um, and it's they're called the Chicago Zoological Society, I believe. And I reached out to them, but they really, they told me, they called me and they said, well, we never really found out about you guys, and we would love to
Mm,
work with the homeschoolers. And he told me, he's like, that's exactly what they do. They cater to after school programs, or actually schools and Saturday family programs. And they do go to, they do outreach to more Latino neighborhoods to let them know that they're a resource,
right, right,
and they are a great resource. But
right.
we also want that too.
Yeah,
So
I think too, it's they always say there's strength in numbers, if
yeah,
you it has to be like more than you calling.
yeah,
I know that, I have a son, my younger son has autism, and there has been a push to have museums close for our kids to
yeah,
have tours because they have a hard time with noise, with a lot of people being around, and, it's very difficult for them. And there are museums now that have like you can go bring your son or daughter, whatever your kid with autism, to a tour while the museum is closed, maybe like from 10. Usually museums here open at 11. So from 10 to 11, they have these programs for kids with autism where the museum is closed and they're the only ones there. It's
mm,
mostly the smaller museums. But I think that, programs during the day, I mean, museums are open during the day.
yeah,
And I think you have to find like that one person in the education department who will be like, yes, we have to do this, or let's do this. So I think it makes total sense, for you're a growing community. And I learned a lot of this, uh, a lot about homeschooling through my friend Erica, and it's just an amazing community. It's just an amazing, you know, uh, there's just like so much strength in this community. So I think if you just keep asking, something will happen
yeah, and,
more.
and it's great that you're in this space. But like, for example, let's say, if like I'm also that, art can be anything. Be like, you mentioned dancing and cooking in the Latino art. I'm also with you in the dancing. If I feel motivated, like in a wedding, I'll like, well, yeah, but I won't dance with my husband because he's not a dancer either. So it really
Right.
have to be other females that are like, let's just go up there and
Yeah, same, same.
but but and then cooking, I do a little bit of it too. I'm not as good as I would like to be. But a parent who would like to make that part of their life, what, like, that has no art education, what would you suggest they can feel more comfortable, where there's more, where they feel like they're not messing up on what they're,
Mhm,
like, let's say if it's a child that's like 7 years old, and this child wants to, basically they want to do more than just buy canvases for a kid and
mhm.
markers, and then here you go, have at it. What would you suggest would be a good starting point, or what book or resource, you know, would you
Yeah, that's a
suggest?
that's a really good question. I know that, and people ask me a lot because I'm always into the art appreciation, but yeah, that's a big part of it, art making. And I do also do art making. My art making workshops are always very much based on art appreciation. So really what the artist is using, whether it be collage or painting, that's usually what we will do. I first would look into your community. There are a lot of community centers that do offer art making courses and teaching artists. And again, I'm really thinking from New York City, right? And I know that we have a lot of resources. But there are some teaching artist organizations too that they are in other, like, i- different states. And so those teaching artists will go to a community center and do an art making shop. And teaching artists are artists that just teach, that they're doing that. Um, Museums also have art making. It's not just tours. They have art making workshops taught by an artist. And so, I don't know, again, you have to look into your community and see what museums are offering. But museums, cultural organizations, I mean, YouTube is a great resource. And I
Yeah,
know that it's hard to, like, it is through the screen. but I think there's a step-by-step aspect to watching videos that you can stop and then you can like, stop and start. And so it's easier to learn like that, like step by step. Um, yeah, those are the three resources that I think that, it's just um I think there's nothing that beats in person because it's great to have like an artist like right there with you. So if you can find someone, maybe even someone who would come to your home and really help, there are those people who might do that. Some, like I said, teaching artists. This is a thing, like it is in New York City. I'm not sure again, but there are teaching artists who that's their job. Um, but I would start like in person, like what's around your community, what's being offered, and then branch out. That, like I said, like YouTube is, they don't call it YouTube University for nothing. Like there is a
Yeah.
lot of resources there. And I would just also just start experimenting with the materials yourself. Like I didn't know how to use pastel, like oil pastels. And I was just like, I'm just gonna try this out, and just making, I think it's hard even to for us to even make a mark sometimes with art supplies. Like just start with the mark, see what it does and what the possibilities are. And I think that, you'll be surprised that your child will learn by experimentation and
Yeah.
just by experimenting with artwork and like art materials. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna look into and see what other resources are out there. But that's what I do is mostly really start with the art and the artist. And there's a lot of process videos out there that will teach you step by step. And that is the beauty of video and YouTube. You can start and stop. So
Yeah. Yeah, you are right about that.
yeah.
YouTube is a great resource, and thank you. So a lot of the museums too, they offer resources on their website, and yeah, but yeah, I will definitely start looking into that. So,
Yeah,
so Nellie, thank you. If you have nothing else to
welcome.
add, you've also written two books. I want to share those as well, the links on this website, and it's a
Sure.
story of drawing with a child with disabilities, right? From your experience. Can you tell me a little bit about the book before?
Sure, sure. So yeah, I've written two books. I have a child, actually he's a teen now with autism. He's gonna be 17 on Thursday. So it's been a long journey. He's nonverbal, and he has a lot of communication challenges, a lot of challenges, but super loving, super affectionate, loves music, and loves like art that is just messy. So I know with him, like it all has to be, he's very sensory based, so he just loves, that kind of like messy art, with which some of our kids do. And so yeah, I wrote, my first book is my creative journey, like creative entrepreneurship journey as a special needs mom. How, people would ask me like, how do you do it? Like I do have an Etsy shop, and I actually do have some resources, some art education resources on there too, and I'm going to start putting up more, so it's
Awesome.
something to look into. But I gave up my museum job when for 7 years to care for him, and I started an Etsy shop, and I started sewing, and I started just making things to sell. And the book really is about how I did that while raising a special needs child. So that's the first book. And the second book is just a um, self-care for the special needs mom, and just some things that I learned, ways to care for myself while caring for someone that needs so much care. Because my son really does need a lot of care. He needs a lot of supervision. Um, he tends to elope. And so there's just a lot of care involved. And sometimes as moms, and I think as moms in general, we tend to lose ourselves. And so it was just a way of getting back to myself. And part of that is art. One of the lessons is go back to the things that give you joy. And I think because I was caring so much for him, I stopped doing a lot of the things that were, that gave me joy, because I had to give it all to him. And I realized that that was not being a good mom, that there needs to be a balance. And so the second book is just advice someone taking care of someone with a disability, how to care for yourself. Um,
That's great. Because there's a lot of moms in our group that decided to homeschool because they have a child with autism and
wow,
thriving at home. So that
that's
would be a
awesome.
great resource for our our community and
Thank you.
post the links to that. But I really thank you, and we're gonna continue to be in touch and
Definitely.
hopefully, yeah, we can work together more because people like you are so needed, in our society, and somebody, you know, that looks like you. So I'm hoping also that in this conversation, um, more and more people, Latinos, will decide to have a career in museum or art history as well.
Oh, I hope so too. I mean, it's so needed.
Yeah.
There's still a lot to be done, but yeah, this is a career path, and I feel like sometimes like the lack of maybe like again like what my mom said, like you're not gonna find a job. You're like, I've always found a job. I've always there's I think that if you like I said, if you do what you love, then a opening will always be there. God will open doors. And so I really believe that. So yeah, I really hope that I would love to mentor
Yeah.
more up and coming Latino and Latina, yeah, people who are interested.
Thank you, Nelly, so
Okay.
much.
You're
And
welcome.
that we will be in touch. Thank you, everyone.
Great. So good talking with you.